Everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my full season review for Cloak and Dagger. Ended about, I think, 2 weeks ago, so I'm a bit behind doing my review on this, but really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good first season. This is the newest addition to I guess it's the Marvel Netflix universe, because they make it seem really weird. If you watch the Netflix shows, it's like, it never really feels like it's a part of the cinematic universe, because they can't, I guess it's just legal stuff. They can't even say like Hulk and Thor and stuff. So it was interesting. They do say it in this show though, which I thought was cool. It was like they do mention Stark, but they also mention Stark in like the TV shows and stuff like that. So Stark, for whatever reason, Tony Stark, Howard Stark, their names are like allowed to be said. I guess because Agent Carter and how they had like Howard Stark in that, and also Roxxon, which relates to this show as well. So I guess that's like the one thing they can say is like they can mention the Starks, and that's pretty much it. So I don't know. Other than that, they didn't really reference anything outside of the Netflix shows, which they mentioned Misty Knight. I can't remember the detective's name in this show because I'm terrible at names, even though I at least remember the main characters for this. But the detective throughout this series, she's actually referenced in the most recent season of Luke Cage. So I thought that was really cool. So this is definitely tied within the Netflix universe. So if this show is popular enough, maybe at some point when they do like a second big crossover like they did with the Defenders, we can actually see Cloak and Dagger go into the Netflix shows for an episode, or just a little crossover thing. They can actually do it because it's like this character was actually there, even though we never saw her. They do reference Misty Knight, and they reference, Misty references her in Luke Cage. So thought that was super cool. I was like, all right, they can at least throw some real names out, which makes like an actual connection. It's not just like, oh yeah, the green person and this and that. It's a legitimate connection, and they did it, they kind of did it through both shows. Like, this person is without a doubt connected to Misty Knight, so they can make those crossovers happen in the future if they so choose. But as far as this show by itself, outside of the Marvel shows, or outside of the Netflix Marvel shows, and of course the films, I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it. The story for the characters I thought was entertaining. The way that they kind of wax and wane as far as their highs and lows, and the emotional peaks and the emotional falls that they have, and it was just fun, like watching that happen with these characters and watching them deal with that as they have these abilities. Tandy has to deal with Roxxon and trying to clear her dad's name and figure out the truth, and then just the way all that played out, I thought was really cool too. Like the way she goes undercover and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool. And then naturally, of course, you have Tyrone's deal, where instead of full corporation, it's just one guy who manages to escape all the time. So he's trying to prove that this one cop killed his brother. Then he finally gets some help, and of course that ends up getting really crazy. And it's like they finally bust him, but surprise, surprise, the one cop that helped him, the one detective's boyfriend, he ends up being murdered. So that sucked for her. And I was like, yeah, not surprised that happened, because that's just how it plays out. So just a lot of crazy stuff with that, and everyone was backing this guy up, even though he's just a terrible dude. And it was just like, whatever, he's one of ours. You came from way up north in New York, and it's like, we don't really care that much for you. So they kill this cop, who was one of their own, and it was just like, oh well. And it's just like, this is insane. And like they have to basically fight to survive. They frame Tyrone for murder of the cop, of course. And so he has to go on the run, basically. Now, and I love the way they did that at the end of the season, where they did a complete 180. So now Tyrone is the one in the church, and then Tandy's the one who's actually back home with her mom. So I like the way it was handled. I like the way it played out. The way they ended it, for sure, with that storyline for Tyrone was interesting, because I forgot he could do that. So, he's grabbing the guy, and he teleports him up to the rooftop, and he's like, he could drop him. And then he like absorbs him, and I was like, oh, I forgot that was a thing. And he's just gone. I'm like, I don't remember how that works. And I kind of don't want to look it up in the comics, but I'm like, I think technically that guy's alive. Excuse me. And he could kind of spit him back out if he wants to, but he has to also have control over that. So who knows? We'll see what the heck happens in season 2 with that. But it really caught me off guard, because I was like, oh, I knew he could do that, but it's been so long since I've seen Cloak and Dagger. Like the only thing they're really in, they were in the last Spider-Man cartoon, like Ultimate Spider-Man. They were in that, and they've been in obviously the comics, but I don't know a ton about them. I just knew enough, and that was just one of those things where I was like, oh, if I knew more, that would have been like, when is that gonna happen? But I didn't remember that, and it was just like, oh crap. So that was crazy. And he's just gone. He's like in this other dimension. I don't know if they're really gonna go into that, but that's basically what it is. It's like an alternate dimension within him. So we'll see how that plays out. But I thought that was cool. Of course, they end up surviving. The whole point of the last episode was like, there's supposed to be a sacrifice. There's always two people. There's two. I forgot the exact term they use, but there's two pairings, and whoever has the mark on their arm is the one that's supposed to die. So of course, it seems like it's going to be Tyrone, and then of course by the end, Tandy gets a mark too when she goes to actually help Tyrone out, and so they end up surviving together because obviously they would. So it was like, all right, that's a cool way they kind of break the cycle, which I don't know if that'll have anything to do with the series in the future with like they were supposed to sacrifice themselves, but ultimately they saved everything and it's supposed to be good. So I don't think they'll go backwards and do like some crazy New Orleans magic stuff, which I wouldn't hate. I would love for anything, honestly, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to like truly dive into magic. I know we have Doctor Strange, but that was like one movie, and that was his introductory movie, so it's not like we got a ton of stuff. So I would love to see that. I would love to see them dive into some crazy magic stuff, and they kind of did a little bit in Luke Cage as well. So I love when they do that in the cinematic stuff because it's like magic is a huge, huge part of the Marvel universe. We just don't really see it, nearly as much. Like Thor, they mention is like it's not what they do isn't magic; it's just more advanced. But there's like legit magic, in the world, like Doctor Strange, and other characters. So I'm like, I would be totally fine if they do that and some crazy New Orleans magical stuff going on in season 2. But I'm looking forward to it. Of course, the detective who does end up being shot, she falls in the water, she gets infected. Now she's like some crazy supervillain. I assume she is going to be Mayhem. I know the character name. I'm just not familiar enough to remember any of the information that's in my head. Like it's somewhere. I just don't remember. I'm like, I know that name. I kind of have an idea, but I'm just like, I don't really remember. So I didn't look it up just yet. But that's kind of what they're going to focus on for season 2 is Mayhem. So I'm looking forward to that. They're going to have, I'm sure, that turmoil of, this is the big bad villain, but also like someone who was helping them, in the previous season because, she was actually a cool character. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. I'm also curious what they're going to be doing going forward as far as this series and the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If this is going to eventually tie into all the stuff with Infinity War. Like that's one of the big things, of course, with Infinity War having happened. There's a million questions up in the air. It's like, what are they going to do with all the Netflix shows? What are they going to do with this show? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I'm extremely curious because that's the one that actually ties in, even if it's not really that connected. That's the show that ties in the most. Every time something happens in a movie, it actually happens in the show. And some stuff in the show technically impacts the movies. They just don't really make it connect in the movies. So with Infinity War, that's a big thing. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Obviously, this whole season took place before Infinity War, so we'll see. Maybe they'll just jump over it. I don't know. They can't. Like it's just one of those things, and I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be modern day. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. That's like the big question. Like everybody has to write around that. That's one of those things. It's so big. Everyone has to write that into their series at this point because it just makes sense. Like the next seasons of pretty much every series should at least be affected by Infinity War. They might not all be, but they definitely should be. That's just how it should be playing out because it's worldwide. It's universe wide actually. So we'll see how that works for season 2. But all in all, I thought this was a good start for the show. I like the way they handled it. The costume I thought was cool for Tyrone. That basically was like his actual comic book cloak, which they do destroy, which I thought was interesting. So it was like he actually had the comic costume, and then they got rid of it. So I was like, oh, that's actually interesting because that's legitimately, pretty much what his costume actually looks like. For Tandy, she basically just has like a full white bodysuit on, so they kind of couldn't do that. It's a very comic book outfit. As is the cloak, but they made it make perfect sense where it's one of the masquerade costumes. So I was like, that's like a genius way to do that. There's no way to do like a full white biker bodysuit because that's kind of what it looks like in the comics. So they can't really pull that one off where it makes 100% sense. But for Tyrone, they did it, and I was like, well, that's definitely awesome. So maybe we'll see it come back. I'm sure it's comic book, so I'm sure they both technically have multiple costumes throughout their long history. But I'm excited to see how they do it for season 2. What if they branch back into that as far as the costumes from the comic books. But really enjoyed this first season. I'm really excited for season 2. I think they did a really good job with how their powers work together, them being able to combine, by the end of the season, stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to season 2. Of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this season. So please comment below. Let me know favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it, and what would you guys want to see from season 2 outside of the obvious mayhem thing. With what they have with the 180 where Tyrone is now at the church, Tandy's back at home. What do you guys want to see from that? Where do you guys think it might actually go? What other tie-ins do you want to see within the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I would love to know your theories and just hopes for season 2. And like I said, definitely what you guys thought about this season as a whole. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.